That's all of the health and happiness news. Don't want to leave you without one little bit of happiness. And so I'll tell you a story that I heard, and I may have told this at another venue that you might have heard, so forgive me if I hit you with it twice. A fellow was sitting at a bar one evening, quiet, low light in the bar, and he was sitting there enjoying a drink, and an attractive young lady sat down beside him. And he continued to drink and he'd look over at this young lady every now and then, and she was very attractive, and he just kept looking, and all of a sudden he just leaned over and gave her a big kiss. And she jumped back and pushed him away and said, "What do you think you're doing? Who gives you the right to do that? What in the world's wrong with you?" And he said, "Well, you just look so much like my lovely wife Grace, I couldn't help myself." She said, "You lie, no good. There's no way. How could you do that? How could you just walk in there and do that?" He says, "As a matter of fact, you sound just like her too." So much for Grace. I want to mention to you as well that Carrie Powers and Ann Walker are representing our club today at the International Conference in Atlanta. And they, with many thousands of other Rotarians, in the hundreds of thousands of Rotarians who attend this event every year, are there to talk about the incredibly good work that Rotarians do around the world. I am so happy that Carrie is there to see that because it's absolutely inspirational to walk around that venue and see and hear the incredible things that Rotarians are doing all around the world. We know what Rotary International does, but this is all about what clubs do in all parts of this world. And so I'm really happy she's there to experience that. She will come back an inspired Rotarian when she returns. I assure you about that, having had the good fortune of that experience. So she's there, won't be here today to be with us. One other thing I would like to let you know about is that we are going to have our Harvest Hope packing project on Thursday, June 22nd. And we're about to run out of time to get our district matching grant money spent. So we have set that up for Thursday the 22nd. We're going to pack a lot of boxes. We're going to pack 400 boxes that day. So we need some good committed volunteers. There's some of you who've been to every one of those events, and I hope you'll come back, and I hope some others of you will join us. It will be 4 o'clock on Thursday, June 22nd. All you have to do is show up at Harvest Hope, right out here on Shop Road. We'll pack for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. We've never packed 400 before, so I'm not sure how long it'll take, but...
John, don't tell them that. I already got guys signed up.
Oh, okay. Well, we're probably going to pack about 200 boxes. It'll take us about 30 minutes.
And beer drinking afterwards.
And beer drinking afterwards. Well, you know who's one of the leaders now, right? You just saw one of the leaders. Jerry Pate and Bob Diggle are going to be the recruiters for this event. And so if you're interested in doing it, if you know you're free that afternoon, I ask that you will catch one of them and tell them that you'll be there, and then show up. And we will drive down the road afterwards if we're not just so tired we can't lift our arm with a cup of beer in it, and we'll stop at the River Rat Brewing Company and have a beer together afterwards. So I hope that you can join us. It really is a lot of fun. It's one of the real fun things we do, and probably one of the fastest things we do as a club. We got a lot of people moving real fast. So I hope you'll join us and participate in that event, which will serve 400 families outside of Richland County. All those boxes go out to the county surrounding Richland County. So we'll be serving 400 families out of that event. Very importantly, I am so pleased to be able to introduce to you today, to introduce himself to you, our new president, not new necessarily, but our president-elect, who in a couple of weeks will be our president-elect, who in a couple of weeks will be responsible for providing our programs to us for the next year. And that is a job, I'm telling you. Having been there, having done that, that is like a full-time job. So I want to introduce to you Stephen Creech, who in a couple of years will be standing up here doing what I'm doing right now. Stephen is a faithful Rotarian, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and why he does Rotary.
Thank you, President John. Good afternoon. Move that up a little bit. President John asked me last week if I would come and share a little bit with you about my background, my service in Rotary, and just share some thoughts about the future of our club as I see it. Tell you a little bit about myself. I was born just down the Sumter Highway, or the Columbia Highway as we called it in Sumter, a while ago, and raised there. I've got a great family over there. My mom and dad still live in Sumter, Steve and Kathy Creech. I've got two sisters, and anyway, family was always very important to us. My mom was the second of 10 kids. They moved down to Lancaster, South Carolina, when she was about 10 years old. And she moved from Allentown, Pennsylvania, so a big Catholic family. My dad is a Sumterite, been there his whole life. He's actually been in the Sumter Rotary for over 35 years and was a past president of the club, so I certainly had him as a role model to look up to. Had a long legacy of public service in my family. My father was the mayor of Sumter. My great-grandfather was also the mayor of Sumter. And both of them have a really unique tie to Shaw Air Force Base. Shaw Field, as it was called back in the 50s when it came to Sumter, was my great-grandfather was the mayor when that happened. And my dad has spent much of his volunteer career working not only as the mayor, but as the military affairs advisor for the city and trying to keep Shaw open. And I think we can appreciate the value of having a good military installation in our community. He has spent countless hours doing that through all the base realignment and closures over the past years, and really proud of the work he's done to make sure Sumter's thriving. Growing up, I was in a pretty disciplined household. We never missed church, not even on vacation. And that was hard to understand sometimes when I was a kid, but looking back, I'm really proud that my parents instilled those values in us. I went to public school. I graduated from Sumter High School and was really active back then in our student government. I was the student body president there. I was also a big runner, distance runner. I was on several cross-country and track and field state championship teams. I went to Wofford to run. I'm part of the Wofford Mafia, as Rusty, who's not here today. But I went there to run and study, and I was pre-med. I studied biology and double majored in government. I did a congressional fellowship while I was in college for Congressman John Spratt, and knew about my junior year I did not want to be a doctor, though. And so I had kind of some unique interest in healthcare and politics and business, and thought, well, what can I do with this, level of interest? And so I wish I could remember who suggested hospital administration, but somebody did. I looked into it, and that's the route I took. I went to graduate school at MUSC and got a master's in healthcare administration, and after that I completed an administrative residency in hospital administration from Spartanburg Regional Healthcare System. Moved back to Charleston and accepted a job with HCA. HCA is the Hospital Corporation of America. At the time, they were the largest for-profit hospital company in the country. 200 hospitals, probably 100 surgery centers. They're based out of Nashville, and they had their flagship hospital in South Carolina was Trident Medical Center. And so I took my first job as the vice president of operations at Trident and went through their chief operating officer development program, focusing on hospital operations. I was promoted within the company a couple of times. In Charleston is where I met my wife, Lindsay. She is from Marion County, South Carolina, the town of Mullins, so she's a good small town girl. She was actually in graduate school here. We dated long distance a little while. She's a a speech therapist, and she was here at Carolina getting a master's in speech therapy. When she finished, she moved to Charleston. You know, the rest is history. We became engaged and married 10 years ago next month. Moved to Columbia in 2007 to become the Vice President of Cardiovascular Services at Providence Hospital. We joined St. Joseph's Catholic Church and quickly came to love this community and the work I was doing. I always joke that, you know, from day one when we moved to Columbia, we had more friends here than we did after 6 years in Charleston. Charleston was just such a transient town, and it felt that way, where Columbia felt like a big, small town, really felt a lot more like home. So we quickly started a family, and that very quickly grew. My children, as they told me last night, my daughter Caroline is 7 3/4, my son Matt is 6 1/2, and my daughter Elizabeth has just turned 4 last Sunday. So they have taught me a lot about life, as your children have you. I joined Rotary here in September of 2008, and I was sponsored by John Johnston, who's a good friend of mine, and made some really good friends in this club since that time. My career has taken a lot of twists and turns that I never expected. And I'll tell you that in 2011 I was laid off. Many of you know REV from Providence. They were going through some struggles, and you know that was really hard for me personally. You know, you didn't have a sense of purpose or identity, and it can bruise the ego a little bit. But I successfully landed at Blue Cross Blue Shield as the Assistant Vice President of Healthcare Strategy 5 years ago last month. So time flies also, and I've been very blessed. I won't tell you so much about what my division of the company does, but it's called Managed Care and Population Health. And we've got a speaker coming next month, Sean Stinson, Dr. Sean Stinson. He is our Chief Medical Officer and also our Senior Vice President over our division. He's going to come and share a little bit with you about that, so I'll save that for that time. But I learned a lot about myself during that turmoil. You know, I had 2 young kids. Both of them actually had some health difficulties during that time, and that was really tough. I believe things happen for a reason. I was really there to help my wife through many doctor's appointments and follow-up visits and time in the ICU. I mean, it was a crazy time in my life, but I think things happen for a reason. And you know, the long hours that I was putting in at the hospital, I wouldn't have been as available as I was. So it all just has a way of working out. I kind of wonder, you know, how my life would be if I didn't go through that. My empathy towards others and my relationship with my wife and kids, I don't think would be as deep if I did not experience those times. So anyway, there were a lot of people in this club that helped me through that, and I'm very grateful for your friendship. I remained in the club during my transition, and I've always had a sense of responsibility to my community that I think was given to me by my family. I think this club does a very good job of teaching us, you know, what's going on in the community. And you know, outside of Rotary, I try to stay active in the community. I serve as the chairman of the board of the Carolina Children's Home. Many people don't know that we were an orphanage and a residential eating disorder program, and we're now transitioning to become a foundation. I am responsible for that transition, along with MZ Wilkins and a lot of other good people in the community that are trying to see to it that those assets continue to help disadvantaged children in South Carolina. So we're excited about it. Rotary service, I've been on the board now for 3 years. I was the club secretary under John Johnston and under Mark Sullivan. And I finally became a bona fide elected member of the board this past year. And as John said, I'll become the president-elect next month. Like anybody who accepts this kind of responsibility, I think that I had a little trepidation, you know, worried about the level of commitment. But one thing that really inspired me to do it was our centennial celebration. I thought that was just such a fantastic event, and it was so well done, and it gave me a great sense of pride for this club and to see the history of our club and how entwined it was with the history of Columbia. And that really is kind of what pushed it over the edge and helping me make my decision. The recap that we did here just did not do it justice, so I hope we can find a way to do that and instill that memory of our centennial event with our club. My goals for next year, first I want to help Carrie have a great year. She's worked really hard and done a fantastic job, and I think we're going to do really well under her leadership. I want to improve this organization, and I want to improve on some of the continuity of our club through these leadership transitions. I think we've got a lot of opportunity there. I want to hire a podium. So I'm going to work on that. So I'm getting a crick in my head over talking to this microphone. But seriously, little small wins like that. Jack Sloan and others have led, we have better audiovisual capabilities than we had 10 years ago, and I still think they could probably get a little better, so we're always looking for things to do. I'm going to work hard to make sure we have good speakers this next year during my year as president. If you look at the history of our club and all of the great speakers we've had, even until today with the Children's Trust, I really think, my opinion is that is the lifeblood of our club, is our programs. It helps us attract new members, and I'm already working hard to make sure we're going to have some good ones next year. I appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit about myself. Thanks, President John.
In case you were asleep and didn't get it, this is a really fine young man, and I am so pleased he agreed to be president of our club year after next. It was one of my goals this year to try to encourage him to step in the line to serve, and I'm personally really grateful for it. I think he'll be wonderful for this club when his year comes around, and he'll be good for us this coming year, because I've already seen the list of some of the programs he's working on, and so you'll enjoy the next year with the programs and the following year under his leadership. Stephen, thank you for taking the time to introduce yourself.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I want to congratulate the pianist for superb playing and inquire about Rusty and where he might be.
I'm not sure where Rusty is, to tell you.
Said last week you weren't gonna be here.
He is at the White House with the Clemson football team.
Oh, is he really?
That's what I was told.
Who said that? Is that where he is?
That's what I was told.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that in our health and happiness report, but I was a little disadvantaged, so that's wonderful. He's at the White House with the Clemson football team. Let's have a round of applause for Rusty and the Clemson football team. Who else from here has made an invited trip to the White House?
Tell Rusty that at least half the people are partying.
I will, at least half. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I did not know that. That's wonderful. We have an important program today, led by Joan Hoffman of the Children's Trust, and it is something that is really important to our state. The work that the Children's Trust does is really important to our state. South Carolina is not one of the leaders in the well-being of children among the 50 states. And they are working hard to make changes in that. And so I'm really glad to have them here. And Joan, if you'll come up and start the program.
Thank you, John. And Melissa's going to join me because we're going to co-present today. But we're going to each introduce ourselves to you. Many of you I have the privilege of knowing. Again, I'm Joan Hoffman, and I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer of Children's Trust of South Carolina. I have almost 30 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, both in management and in philanthropy. And Stephen, I just had an aha moment sitting here. Your mother and I worked together when I was at the Community Foundation with the Sumter County Community Foundation, and I did not get the two together. Please tell her I said hello. I really enjoyed working with her. Additionally, I wish Rusty was here because I was going to tease him a little bit and say I am an avid Gamecock fan. I have my master's in business from the University of South Carolina, as well as degrees in journalism and in theater. And in fact, when the Pope was here at USC, I had the privilege of carrying the cross for him, which was an amazing experience for me. I have served as board president of Together South Carolina, or formerly known as the South Carolina Association of Nonprofit Organizations, Mason once led. And I currently serve on the board of East Point Academy, which is South Carolina's first Chinese immersion school. A lot of people don't realize we have a Chinese immersion school here in Casey, West Columbia. And in fact, we are building a brand new elementary school in West Columbia at the tune of about $30 million over the next year. So I'm very excited. I have a 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old girl. Both are learning to speak and write in Chinese, and I'm realizing that they're learning how to communicate with each other in a way that I will not understand. So I need to take some Chinese myself. So I'm going to let Dr. Melissa Strompolis take a moment to introduce herself.
With you on the taller podium here too. Good afternoon, my name is Melissa Strompolis. I am the Director of Research and Evaluation at Children's Trust. I've been with the Trust for about 3.5 years now. My background is in community psychology. I've got my PhD in community psychology from UNC Charlotte, and also another degree in nonprofit management from UNC Charlotte as well. I'm also an affiliate faculty member in the College of Education and also the College of Social Work here at USC. And I also volunteer for Richland County CASA. So I serve as a guardian ad litem, which means I'm a child advocate for kids who come into contact with the Department of Social Services. I'm actually originally from Wisconsin, so I'm a bit like Switzerland when it comes to the Carolina-Clemson debate. But I came to South Carolina because my husband is in the Air Force, so he's stationed out at Shaw Air Force Base. And he's currently serving in Korea for a year so that we could actually stay here for another 3 years. So really excited that both him and I have the opportunity to be here for a whole nother tour as well.
Thank you, Melissa. So we're going to start first a little bit with, and I just pulled the microphone out, a little bit about Children's Trust of South Carolina. Many of you may not realize that Children's Trust is a statewide nonprofit that was mandated into existence by the state legislature. And in fact, we operate as a nonprofit across the state. Our mission is to strengthen families and to lead communities to prevent child abuse, neglect, and unintentional injuries. And if we reach our goal, we have a stronger South Carolina for every child across the state, for every family, and for every community. Our values that we try to embody include leadership, inclusiveness, innovation, and trust. And we work really hard every day within our organization to make sure that that's ingrained in our attitudes and our behavior within our work. We actually work along the social ecological model within the Children's Trust. And what that means is we recognize that there are multiple levels of influence that impact behavior. So if we're going to change behavior, either at the personal level or at a community level, we've got to work on all these levels in order to make change. So these are the primary areas in which Children's Trust conducts its work. We do a lot of work in policy and advocacy. We have, in fact, Melissa helps to lead our research and evaluation work. We have a lot of work in partnership and collaboration because we find sometimes across South Carolina that there's turfism that happens, right? And sometimes partners don't want to come together for the benefit of the whole, and we are a neutral body and we can help bring those organizations and those communities together. Additionally, we do a lot of work in community awareness and outreach. How do we share the message of prevention? We do a great deal in program delivery and site support. We actually fund sites all across the state. But in addition to giving them the funding to deliver direct services, we provide them with TA and site monitoring support to help ensure that they are delivering the program to the best of its ability. So there's a lot of work that we do on multiple levels. And essentially, Children's Trust is an intermediary organization. We do not do the direct services within our office. In fact, a lot of times when we get a call for a volunteer or an intern, we state to them, we don't do direct services. We don't have families in our office every day. We help to make those organizations, the communities within which we work, and the systems stronger, and that's where our work lies. So why are we here today? How do we help you in your work every day? Well, as we know, and as business leaders, we can relate to return on investment, right? We spend a great deal of our time thinking about and focusing on how do we decrease absenteeism in our workforce? How do we decrease related job injuries? Or how do we keep a hold on healthcare costs? I know in talking with Karen, where's Karen Blackman? I saw her come in earlier. How do we bring businesses into our communities who want to work in our community and live in our community? And let's face it, the reality is if we are going to have strong communities from which we draw our employees and we attract businesses, then it's up to us to create those strong communities. We can't just solely depend on cooperative ministries and Beth's group, our Salvation Army, or the school districts, or the hospitals to do all that heavy lifting. The reality is it's in our best interest to create those strong communities. And that's why Rotary exists, service above self. How do we make things stronger? How do we help improve? And so essentially preventing ACEs, and that's something we're going to talk about today, what we call what is known as adverse childhood experiences, is not only in Children's Trust's best interest, it's in your best interest as business leaders. And Melissa's going to tell you a little bit more about ACEs.
So for the next few minutes, I'll provide kind of a very brief Mount Everest overview of what the ACE study is and some of the things that are going on in South Carolina. So then we can spend a few time on some slides that really put this information in context within the business community. So these are kind of the main points I'm going to quickly review with you here. So as Joan said, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience, and we use this term to talk about traumatic events that can happen in a child's life prior to the age of 18. So this might include things like abuse and neglect, growing up in a home where someone uses illegal substances, or growing up in the home with domestic violence. And we care about ACEs because they are actually related to things in life later on in your adulthood that aren't very good conditions or circumstances. So the ACE study was actually the first large-scale seminal investigation to look at the impact of multiple types of adverse childhood experiences on outcomes in adulthood, everything from sort of the health to education to different social aspects as well. The ACE study sort of found kind of three major components or three key findings. The first is that ACEs were highly common. And what's interesting about how common that they were is that this first large-scale seminal study was done in people that you would traditionally think as maybe well-off or upper class, not a population that you would deem potentially at risk. So this population included 17,000 adults that were a part of a Kaiser Permanente health insurance program out in San Diego, California. They were primarily white, they were highly educated, and had access to some of the best healthcare in the world. So even within this population, the investigators found that experiences like these were common. They also found that these experiences were highly interrelated. So it didn't necessarily make sense to study individual adversities like childhood sexual abuse by themselves because lots of these traumatic events tended to co-occur with each other. So what the investigators did is they actually came up with something that they termed the ACE score. And the ACE score is simply a count of the number of adversities that a child experienced in their life. So if a child experienced physical abuse, no matter how many times or how often, they had an ACE score of 1. If a child experienced physical abuse and their parents were divorced or separated, that would be an ACE score of 2, and so on. And so the third key finding that they found just related to the ACE score is that there was an enormous impact on health and social outcomes. So much so that the higher your ACE score, the more likely you were to have various health and social problems. So again, the ACE study found that ACEs were common, they were interrelated, and had a huge impact on later adulthood life. After that seminal study happened back in the early 1990s, there were a lot of different investigations that took place since then to examine the impact of ACEs. Studies took place in other healthcare settings, they took place in businesses and schools, pretty much any facet of life that you can think of. People examined the impact of ACEs because that's how broad-based the impact is when you have that type of childhood. So at Children's Trust, what we've done over the past several years is to actually start collecting data on South Carolinians to see what ACEs looks like in our state. And there's lots of other information available on our website, but just really briefly, what we found so far is that 62% of all South Carolina adults have experienced at least one ACE prior to the age of 18. So ACEs within South Carolina are pretty common, just like they were in the national study as well. We also found that of those that said they had at least one ACE, 88% had at least one more. So they're also highly interrelated in South Carolina. So if you have one ACE, you're very, very highly likely to have at least one more. And when we look at sort of those individual experiences, what we found for South Carolina is that divorce or separation, emotional abuse, and substance use and misuse were the most common ACEs reported in our state. And to me, what's also very interesting is when we compare our data in South Carolina to other states and national studies, there are some common elements, but some things that make us a little bit different. So for example, in the national study that was done out in California, 11% of that population reported experiencing emotional abuse, but in South Carolina, that percentage was 30. And so that was something that really stood out to us as an area we might potentially want to address or look a bit more into to see what's going on. So that's kind of the large view of ACEs in the ACE study, and now we're going to go ahead and talk about this and some data a little bit within the business sort of community context. So what you're seeing up on this slide is it shows the relationship between the ACE score and worker performance. So you're seeing 3 sets of bars for job problems, financial problems, and absenteeism. And within each set of bars is the ACE score. So all the way over here on the left, this blue bar is a score where you're, oh no, I don't think the scores actually came up. So this is an ACE score of 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 more over on the pink bars there. So when we look at these bars here, what we're seeing again is that as the ACE score goes up, as it increases from 0 to 4, we see that the percentage of health and social problems, the percentages that are, I don't think you can see them on this screen, so I apologize over there, but they are over here. You can see that the percentage goes up for the likelihood of having various health or social problems. So whether we're looking at job problems, financial problems, or absenteeism, these are all impacted with more ACEs that people report. So you also might be thinking to yourself now then, what are these problems that workers are reporting? This graphic here tends to provide us a bit more information about how we get from ACEs to poor worker performance. So on this slide, what we're looking at is you can see issues that range from marital problems to back pain, all the way down to issues with alcohol. So these examinations, this type of research, helps us to show how ACEs are associated with health and well-being challenges that then contribute to poor worker performance. So with this data, we can tend to start to see that some of the things that we might be thinking about that are going on within our workforce, these sort of personal issues, might be a bit different than kind of what we're expecting. And so for some employees, in order for us to be able to provide better supports to them, we might have to think about how health services might help to boost productivity better than an increase in technology or even job skills training. So there's a huge cost to dealing with ACEs, not just within South Carolina, but within our country as well. So research has sort of demonstrated and estimated that the indirect and direct costs of back pain caused by ACEs is at $28 billion. $44 billion for depression and its related outcomes, and $246 billion for substance use and misuse. And so these are massive losses that occur despite workplace safety programs and despite spending an astronomical amount of money on healthcare in this country. So these findings suggest that there might be a great opportunity then for employers and healthcare to work together to prevent and address the impact of ACEs. So it's sort of even a small fracture of the economic and human resources that get spent on conventional approaches to dealing with worker performance issues. If we can identify the root cause of some of those problems, then we could reasonably expect to have a more effective way to improve worker health, worker well-being, and worker performance.
So a lot of times then we're asked, well, what can we do? What can I do as an employer? What can I do as a community member? What can we do as Rotary? Well, one of the first things that we would hope that you would do is seek to learn more about ACEs. Seek to learn more and understand about adverse childhood experiences. Within the Children's Trust, Melissa has worked very hard to develop a South Carolina ACE initiative. We have almost 70 master trainers deployed across the state of South Carolina, geographically and across disciplines, who can provide training to organizations, to businesses and others on what is ACEs and what can we do about it. So we think it's helpful to become informed about ACEs across the state as well as in our workplace. Additionally, as employers, and many of you already do some of these things, right? You adopt family-friendly policies. What are policies you can have in your business, whether they include having health benefits, flexible hours, telecommuting, but what are those policies you have that can help support families across our state? Additionally, how can we help build resilience within our employees and within our organization? For example, do you have an employee assistance program that offers counseling services when someone has a need for that? And also professional development. How are you helping your employees grow within your organization? And then finally, how can you help build social connections amongst your teams? We have research now that shows that if there are protective factors in a family and a community's lives, that these protective factors will help prevent child abuse and neglect. One of those protective factors is social connections. If someone feels connected socially, they are more likely to prevent abuse and neglect. They are more likely to have resources and individuals with whom they can connect to. And in fact, Stephen kind of shared that with us earlier. When he was going through a hard time in his family, he really appreciated the social connections he had amongst Rotary and amongst his friends. We all need those connections. But what can you do as an employer to create those connections within your own team? And sometimes it's very simple by offering employee relations programs and activities that bring your team together, that you get to know each other better, and you also get to know your team members' families. Additionally, recognition programs within your organization. And then finally, to bring it back around, continuing to be informed in trauma-informed care and how you can be supportive of your team as a whole. Because if we're supportive of our team and we're supportive of our community, then we help to draw a stronger workforce for our businesses. And I know we are close to being out of time, so we have a few minutes for questions.
Tim, can you talk a little bit more about the legislation that founded, what were the circumstances that led to this happening, who led it, any history on that?
You mean the Children's Trust
Right.
developing? My goodness, that was almost 30 years ago, and as I understand it, there was a movement across the nation to develop Children's Trust funds across the nation in different states, and it was empowering states to take a look at child abuse and neglect prevention, because so much money has been poured into treatment. Billions of dollars is poured into things like foster care and the orphanages and those things helping children after the fact. And there was a movement across the nation working to look at prevention. And so what you saw almost 30 years ago, or over 30 years ago now, was that states were empowering legislation to set up trust funds to invest in prevention activities across the state, and South Carolina did that. And in fact, originally, the South Carolina legislature, we were one of the first to check off organizations. Now I think there's 16, and that money was to go into an endowment fund, and the original goal was to get up to $5 million so that money could be invested back across the state. As they developed more checkoff campaigns, the money that came in from that decreased over time. I think on average now we probably get about $30,000 a year from checkoff. So that's how much of that originated. Yes, sir.
Are there, this is statewide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are there regions or counties of the state that says, you know, these are really high on our chart and targeted?
We've actually looked at the way that the data comes to us. The lowest geographic unit that we can look at is aligned with DHEC's regions. So there's essentially 9 regions across the state that we can examine the data. And I think what was most surprising is that if you had asked folks, you know, pick a region around the state where you think ACEs are highest, whether you're looking at overall or individual ones, and I'm not sure that anyone would have said right here. But that's actually what we found. So region 4, which is Lexington, Richland, Kershaw, and one more. But that region right here is the region that had the highest prevalence of ACEs.
Other
What,
questions?
as a follow-up, those other regions, are they doing something correctly? Or is there something we're doing really bad here?
Yeah. Well, I think that would be a very, very long answer because you'd have to look across all of the things that really impact, and there may be some places that are doing things really well in one area and maybe have some opportunities in others. But from my time with the Children's Trust, what seems to happen is in conversations we tend to focus on everyone else. We have all our state agencies here, we've got lots of businesses and service sectors here where we deploy outside, and it seems like we tend to have less of a focus in and of ourselves here. But they would probably take a large, a lot of folks in the room to really examine in each region what exactly is going well and what's not.
If we had that answer, John, we'd have a magic bullet that we'd be ready to deploy immediately. But yeah, it takes a lot of peeling of the onion to make that. But the good news is when we first started looking at ACEs data and we first saw that it was done originally in California and done in other parts of the state, Children's Trust recognized that if we really wanted to look at the data, we needed South Carolina data. So we've been very excited to invest the money to collect the South Carolina data over the last several years. So that is something we're very excited about.
And just to clarify as well, in case folks are wondering, the data that we're presenting, when we present it, when it's broken out by race or ethnicity or by geographic unit or whatever, it is actually proportional to the population in that state. So when we talk about differences, we are talking about real or absolute differences.
Thank you, ladies. It is a hugely important topic in our state. Our state has a lot of work to do, and I know you all are busy getting about doing it. And so I want to thank Melissa. I'll give her the gift for the day. Thank you for being here. Stephen, since Carrie isn't here, do you remember who's the program is for next week?
I know Frank Martin's coming at the end of the month.
At the end of the month. That's the same thing I remember. I kind of looked across the schedule there. Yes, hopefully something won't happen, some phenomenal recruit that he has to go talk to in California or something on that Monday the 26th. But he is scheduled to come visit with us on the 26th.
John,
Yes.
Susan Elkins will be speaking.
Susan,
to us
that's
about
right.
Palmetto College.
How could I forget that? One of our own members will be speaking next week about the Palmetto College, and she has done a great job with that part of the University of South Carolina. So, and she is a very committed Rotarian as well. So we will, don't see anybody at the piano, so we will not end in song. We will walk out quietly today.